You've seen the viral videos, the entitled outbursts, the parking lot showdowns and phone-wielding threats. But some stories go far beyond public meltdowns into something darker. Tonight, we go deep into 5 chilling cases where so-called Karens didn't just call the manager, they crossed the line into criminal infamy. From dangerous delusions of justice to real-life consequences in the courtroom, these stories will make your jaw drop and your skin crawl. This isn't just drama, it's true crime, and justice was watching. So dim the lights, get comfortable, and settle in. Over 2 hours of haunting stories start now with our first case. The Vigilante Karen, the Hannah Payne story background and setting. It was a mild spring evening in Clayton County, Georgia, May 7th, 2019. Around 6 p.m., the end of rush hour, a minor traffic accident disrupted the calm. At a busy intersection, 62-year-old Kenneth Herring, a black man and grandfather, accidentally ran a red light and grazed a semi-truck with his Dodge Dakota pickup. Both drivers pulled over, presumably to exchange information and wait for police. Among the bystanders who stopped was Hannah Payne, a young white woman in her early 20s who had been driving home from her job in property management. Payne didn't know Herring personally. She was simply a witness to the fender bender. But in the next moments, she would make fateful choices that changed both of their lives forever. What began as a routine accident on a Tuesday evening was about to spiral into a deadly confrontation. Payne initially appeared to be just a concerned citizen. She pulled over and called 911 to report the crash, providing details and confirming who was at fault. Another bystander, an off-duty corrections officer with medical training, also stopped to assist. Observing Herring's condition, this officer grew concerned. Herring seemed disoriented, with unusually red, glassy eyes. He suspected the older man might be in diabetic shock rather than intoxicated. For about 15-20 minutes, everyone waited calmly for police to arrive. But as time dragged on, Kenneth Herring, possibly confused or impaired by his medical state, decided to get back into his truck and leave the scene. This split-second decision set off a chain reaction. Herring's attempt to drive away sparked Hannah Payne's sense of duty. In her mind, a driver fleeing an accident could cause more harm on the roads. She later testified that she believed Herring was definitely inebriated and a danger to others. As Herring pulled off, the corrections officer allegedly urged Payne, "Go," implying she should follow the pickup to get its license plate number. Payne agreed, against her better judgment, and got back into her Jeep. Before she left, a 911 dispatcher explicitly instructed her not to pursue the hit-and-run driver and to let officers handle it. Payne told the operator she understood. Despite that clear warning, she made the decision to follow Kenneth Herring anyway. Payne tailed Herring's truck through the suburban roads of Clayton County, relaying updates to the 911 dispatcher as she went. She would later claim that she only meant to get his license plate and guide police, considering herself a kind of messenger for law enforcement on the scene. The dispatcher, however, had been adamant that she stay away, repeating the instruction multiple times. At trial, prosecutors noted the 911 operator told Payne 4 separate times not to chase Herring. But Payne was determined. She believed letting a reckless, possibly drunk driver escape would be a greater wrong. With adrenaline pumping, she kept the dispatcher on speakerphone and pressed on, convinced she was trying to do the right thing, as her defense later put it. Before long, Hannah Payne managed to catch up to Herring's truck at a traffic light. In that moment, she took the law into her own hands. Payne used her Jeep to block Herring's vehicle at an intersection, cutting off any escape route. Both vehicles came to a halt. What happened next unfolded in seconds. Payne jumped out of her car and approached Herring's driver's side door, phone in one hand and a loaded Glock 9mm pistol in the other. She was not a police officer, just a civilian with a concealed carry weapon, but she acted with the urgency of an enforcer. According to witnesses and Payne's own later testimony, she screamed at Herring to get out of his truck, punctuating her demand with profanity. "Get the out of the truck," she yelled, by her own admission. In those tense moments, Payne would later say she was simply trying to compel Herring to return to the original crash site and wait for authorities. But her aggressive approach escalated the situation beyond control. A physical struggle broke out between the two. Exactly who grabbed whom first became a point of dispute. Payne claimed that the 62-year-old Herring lunged at her and tried to grab her handgun, causing it to fire accidentally during the tussle. She insisted her finger was never on the trigger, implying that Herring, in effect, caused his own fatal wound by pulling on the gun. However, prosecutors and witnesses painted a different picture. They said Payne was the aggressor from the start, a vigilante who initiated a needless confrontation. A bystander's cell phone video, played later in court, captured the tail end of the altercation and audio of Payne screaming, supporting the view that she was violently confrontational. What is clear is that in the midst of that chaotic encounter, a single gunshot rang out on the roadside. The bullet struck Kenneth Herring in the abdomen, causing a grievous injury. Herring collapsed, mortally wounded. The 911 dispatcher, still on the line, would have heard the commotion turn to horror. Other witnesses rushed to help as sirens finally approached. The minor accident had now become a deadly shooting. Kenneth Herring was beyond saving. He died from the gunshot, there at the scene on that May evening. Hannah Payne, the woman who took it upon herself to chase down a stranger, was taken into police custody. In the immediate aftermath, she reportedly sobbed and insisted that Herring pulled the trigger himself, clinging to the story that the shooting was an accident. But investigators saw things differently. To them, Payne's actions went far beyond a Good Samaritan effort. That night, she was arrested and charged with murder for killing Kenneth Herring. As one prosecutor later put it, Hannah Payne had effectively appointed herself judge, jury, and executioner over a mere traffic violation, a vigilante act that would not go unpunished. In the weeks and months that followed, the case quietly wound its way through the Georgia justice system, even as it drew growing public scrutiny. Payne was indicted on a slew of serious charges: malice murder, Georgia's term for intentional murder, felony murder causing a death during commission of a felony, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and multiple counts of weapon possession during a crime. She was released on bond pending trial, but under strict conditions. For over 4 years, the case faced delays, pretrial hearings, motions, and likely the general slowdown of court dockets in 2020-2021. All the while, Kenneth Herring's family waited for justice, and Hannah Payne awaited her day in court, steadfast in her claim that she only wanted to help and never intended to hurt anyone. By late 2023, the trial of State of Georgia versus Hannah Payne finally began in Clayton County. It quickly became clear that this was not a simple self-defense case, but a referendum on vigilante behavior. 911 call recordings played for the jury revealed how explicitly and how often Payne had been told to stand down. The dispatcher's voice could be heard telling her again and again to return to the scene and do not follow the fleeing driver. Payne had acknowledged those instructions in the moment, yet willfully ignored them. In court, a prosecutor hammered on this point, noting that Payne was warned 4 times to let police handle it. Jurors listened to these tapes, understanding that at any of those moments Payne could have chosen to stop, but she did not. Payne took the bold step of testifying in her own defense, hoping to persuade the jury that she meant no harm. Fighting back tears on the stand, the 24-year-old defendant recounted her version of events. She portrayed herself as a concerned citizen trying to do the right thing by preventing a possibly impaired driver from escaping responsibility. She told the court she felt, with 911 on the phone, that she had a duty. "I could be a messenger," she explained, describing how she believed she was relaying police instructions to Herring. Crucially, Payne stuck to her story that the gun went off by accident during the scuffle. In an almost unbelievable claim, she suggested that Herring essentially shot himself by pulling on her weapon. This claim was met with deep skepticism. The prosecution pointed out that Herring was unarmed and much older. It was Hannah who brought a gun into an otherwise non-violent situation. They argued she created the danger by instigating a confrontation. Prosecutors accused Payne of playing cop, telling the jury that she had taken law enforcement into her own hands with tragic results. Day by day, the trial laid bare 2 very different narratives. The defense painted Hannah Payne as naive and perhaps overly eager to help, a young woman with no prior experience drawing her gun who panicked when a suspect fought back. The prosecution, however, painted her as an overzealous vigilante, fueled by self-righteousness, someone who angrily stepped outside the bounds of the law. They highlighted how Payne not only ignored police directives, but also escalated the situation by screaming profanities and attempting to drag an older man out of his vehicle at gunpoint. It emerged that a brief cell phone video clip, taken by a passerby, captured Payne at the truck's door and the sound of her yelling, undermining any notion that she was calmly negotiating. In cross-examination, Payne had to admit that she followed Herring in her car and cut him off at that intersection, an aggressive maneuver, especially given the dispatcher's clear orders to stop the chase. When confronted with the 911 operator's repeated warnings, Payne downplayed them, saying she only heard the instruction not to chase once and misunderstood the rest. It was a telling moment. Even in hindsight, she struggled to fully acknowledge how many red lines she had crossed. After about a week of testimony, the case went to the jury. The deliberation did not take long. In just 2 hours, the jurors reached a unanimous verdict. On December 12, 2023, Hannah Payne was found guilty on all counts for the shooting death of Kenneth Herring. She stood in the courtroom as the clerk read out each charge. Malice murder, guilty. Felony murder, guilty. Aggravated assault, guilty. False imprisonment, guilty. Weapons charges, guilty. Payne, who had been composed while testifying, broke down sobbing as the reality set in. This young woman, who once believed she was doing the right thing, was now officially a convicted murderer. Hannah Payne breaks down in tears during her sentencing hearing. After the guilty verdict, the case moved to a sentencing hearing where the human toll of Payne's actions was on full display. Members of Kenneth Herring's family addressed the court, painting a loving portrait of the man whose life was taken. His sisters spoke through tears about how Kenneth was the big brother who always looked out for them. One sister, Vicky Herring, lamented that Kenneth's 2 children would never see their father again, and his grandchildren would grow up without their granddad. "I can go to the gravesite, but he can't respond," another sister said, mourning the permanent silence of a lost sibling. They implored the judge to show no leniency to Payne, arguing that just as Kenneth received the equivalent of a death sentence, she should receive the maximum punishment allowed by law. Hannah Payne's supporters also spoke, pleading for some measure of mercy. A longtime family friend described Hannah as a kind-hearted young woman and insisted she never wanted harm to come to anyone. Payne herself, now 25 years old and wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, wept openly in court, apologizing through sobs. It was an astonishing contrast. The confident, indignant figure from the 2019 incident, now a remorseful felon awaiting fate. Judge Jewel C. Scott delivered the sentence on December 15, 2023. Citing the needless loss of life and the jury's clear message, the judge sentenced Hannah Payne to life in prison with the possibility of parole, plus additional consecutive years for the other charges. Under Georgia law, life with parole still meant Payne would not even be eligible for release for at least 30 years. In her case, not until she is in her 50s. In fact, due to the added weapons and assault convictions, prosecutors noted that she would likely serve a minimum of 43 years before any chance of parole. Essentially, the judge agreed with the victim's family. Hannah Payne would spend the prime of her life behind bars. As the sentence was pronounced, Payne sobbed uncontrollably, her earlier composure gone. The courtroom was heavy with emotion, but also a sense of closure. Clayton County District Attorney Tasha Mosley spoke to reporters afterward, calling the outcome a victory for justice. Importantly, DA Mosley also stated that despite the racial optics of the case, a white shooter and a black victim, her office did not believe the crime was racially motivated. This was simply, in their view, a case of a person unlawfully taking on a role that wasn't hers, and a tragic death resulting. Still, many observers could not ignore the racial undertones. Payne's actions reminded some of notorious incidents of racial vigilantism. The case had occurred just months before the killing of Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, another instance where citizens chased down a black man under the pretense of law and order. In the public discourse, Hannah Payne's name was often mentioned alongside the pejorative term Karen, slang for an entitled white woman policing others' behavior. In fact, one media outlet bluntly dubbed her the Georgia Karen, calling her crime one of the worst cases of Karen behavior seen, a self-appointed enforcer whose moral self-righteousness ended in bloodshed. News of Hannah Payne's conviction made headlines beyond Georgia, sparking debate about citizens' arrests and the limits of vigilante action. To some, Payne initially looked like an everyday hero who tried to stop a hit and run, a narrative her defense team pushed with the saying, "No good deed goes unpunished." But as details emerged, public opinion largely shifted. The 911 audio and eyewitness accounts revealed a scenario that was less about a good deed and more about dangerous overreach. On social media and in op-eds, critics argued that Payne had a profound, misplaced sense of authority. By keeping 911 on the line, she seemed to believe she had tacit approval to engage in a high-speed chase and confrontation. Many saw this as a cautionary tale of how an overzealous do-gooder can cross the line into criminality. Trying to do the right thing is not the right answer, one headline quipped grimly. The racial dimension of the case also fueled public intrigue and outrage. While prosecutors didn't prosecute it as a hate crime, community members and civil rights commentators noted the uncomfortable pattern. A white person felt entitled to police a black person with deadly consequences. Payne was never heard using racial slurs, but the optics led to comparisons with other infamous Karens caught on camera. Online, people recalled the case of Central Park Karen Amy Cooper, who in 2020 called police on a black birdwatcher, fabricating threats. Others mentioned Soho Karen Mia Ponsetto, who in the same year tackled an innocent black teen over a missing cell phone, later pleading guilty to unlawful imprisonment as a hate crime. Hannah Payne's case fit this pattern of individuals acting on bias or extreme entitlement, except hers ended in a man's death. That made it uniquely chilling. Even though D.A. Mosley emphasized that race was not officially a factor, the case resonated as part of America's ongoing reckoning with vigilantism and racial bias. Within Clayton County, the outcome was largely met with relief. Kenneth Herring's family expressed gratitude that the legal system held his killer accountable. Their loved one's name might not be as nationally known as some other victims of vigilantes, but in that courtroom, justice was served. For those close to Hannah Payne, the result was tragic in its own way. A young woman with no criminal record, now spending her life in a prison cell, all because she couldn't restrain herself from playing hero. If there is any solace, it's that both families and the community received a thorough airing of the facts in court, and a clear message emerged. Taking the law into your own hands will carry severe consequences. The story of Hannah Payne is a sobering true crime saga of intentions gone horribly wrong. It began with what seemed like a moral duty, stopping a reckless driver, but it ended in a fatal shooting and a lifetime of regret. Payne herself admitted at sentencing that her heart had broken 1,000,000 times over what happened, yet no apology can undo the outcome. Kenneth Herring lost his life over a minor traffic accident, and his family lost a husband, father, and friend. The quiet shock of this case lies in its ordinariness. An ordinary evening, an ordinary person convinced she was doing good, transforming in an instant into a perpetrator of violence. It's a cautionary tale told in calm, haunting detail, reminding us that vigilantism, even born of a sense of righteousness, has no place in a civilized society. Hannah Payne now understands this from behind prison walls. Her case stands as a stark example that no matter how justified someone may feel in the moment, no one is above the law. And when you cross that line, the law will hold you accountable. In the end, the vigilante Karen of Clayton County learned too late that some boundaries should never be crossed. The price of her moral certainty was a man's life and her own freedom. The courtroom drama may be over, but the impact of that night in 2019 reverberates still, a lingering, unsettling reminder of how quickly righteous conviction can turn into quiet tragedy. Each time the story is retold in a calm and measured voice, it carries an implicit plea. Let this be a lesson so that no similar tragedy need happen again. Our next story takes us to New York City just after the winter holidays. In the wake of our previous case of unchecked entitlement, this second tale unfolds in a fashionable Manhattan hotel, a place of comfort and luxury that became the scene of a shocking confrontation. It's late December 2020, and while the city is quieter than usual amid pandemic precautions, the Arlo Soho Hotel still hosts travelers seeking a holiday refuge. What begins as a seemingly minor inconvenience, a misplaced smartphone, will soon explode into a nationally infamous incident of false righteousness and entitlement. This is the true story of a young woman whose certainty of her own rightness led her to commit a crime in broad daylight, all under the illusion that she was the victim. And ultimately, it's the story of how she was held accountable. The Arlo Soho Boutique Hotel in Manhattan, a chic, modern setting that became the unlikely backdrop for a viral confrontation in December 2020. To set the stage, we should understand a bit about the individual at the center of this story. 22-year-old Mia Ponsetto. Hailing from California, Ponsetto was a former cheerleader and, by many accounts, an ordinary young woman in her early 20s. But beneath the normal exterior, she had a troubling pattern of behavior emerging in 2020. In fact, Ponsetto had multiple run-ins with the law, even before the events in New York. In February 2020, long before anyone would call her the Soho Karen, she and her mother had a drunken altercation at the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills. Hotel staff asked them to leave. They refused, allegedly became belligerent, and when police arrived, both women threw tantrums, leading to their arrests. Later that year, Ponsetto was also arrested twice for driving under the influence, once in Los Angeles and again 5 months later in Ventura County. These incidents, while separate, hinted at a pattern, a disregard for rules and an explosive temper when confronted. Friends and family might have seen these as red flags, but to the wider world, Mia Ponsetto was still unknown. That is, until the holiday weekend of 2020, when her name and face would be broadcast everywhere. By late December, Ponsetto had traveled to New York City. Perhaps it was a vacation or holiday visit, a chance to enjoy Manhattan's charm. She checked into the Arlo Soho, a boutique hotel known for its trendy atmosphere and sleek design. At this point, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. However, the stage was set for a confrontation fueled by a false sense of righteousness. Ponsetto's personal history of acting out, feeling above the rules, or justified in her outbursts was about to collide with a situation that, in her mind, demanded her form of justice. It is the afternoon of December 26, 2020, the day after Christmas. The lobby of the Arlo Soho is quiet and warm, decorated with subtle holiday lights. A 14-year-old boy, Kayan, Harold Jr., passes through the lobby with his father, Keon Harold Sr., a Grammy-winning jazz musician who is a guest at the hotel. Father and son likely have the relaxed air of people enjoying a holiday break. Keon Jr. is carrying his own smartphone, perhaps texting friends or checking messages as they prepare to head out. Across the lobby, however, Mia Ponsetto is growing increasingly frantic. She cannot find her iPhone. In the span of a few tense moments, this ordinary inconvenience spirals into a dramatic flashpoint. Ponsetto becomes convinced that someone has taken her phone. Her gaze falls on Keon Jr., the black teenager who had the misfortune of being in the lobby at the same time. In her mind, a narrative forms almost instantly. This young man must have stolen it. Fueled by panic and an apparent sense of entitlement, the belief that she has the right to accost anyone in service of her property, Ponsetto decides to confront the boy. She marches toward Keon Jr. and his father, demanding that the teenager hand over the phone she believes is hers. The situation escalates with startling speed. Ponsetto grows agitated and aggressive as the heralds react with confusion and alarm. Keon Jr., taken aback, insists he doesn't have her phone. His father steps between his son and the irate stranger, trying to defuse the situation and protect the boy. Witnesses later recalled, and security footage confirmed, what happened next. Mia Ponsetto lost all restraint. She began chasing the 14-year-old through the lobby, desperate to prove that he held her missing iPhone. In a frenzy, she lunged at the teenager. She grabbed at him repeatedly, and when he tried to back away, she tackled him to the floor. This was not a mild scuffle. Ponsetto was fighting as if trying to apprehend a criminal, even though she had no evidence beyond her own certainty. According to a later lawsuit, she even began pawing through the boy's pockets as he was down on the ground, rummaging through his pockets in an attempt to steal his phone, as the legal complaint would describe it. The terrified teenager yelled that he didn't have her device, while his father shouted for Ponsetto to stop. Amid the chaos, a hotel manager attempted to intervene, but not in the way one might expect. Instead of immediately protecting the innocent teen, the manager hesitated. He even asked Keon Jr. to show his phone to prove it wasn't Ponsetto's, a request that the boy's father angrily resisted. One can imagine the distress Keon Harold Sr. felt. His teenage son was being manhandled and accused for no reason, and now even a hotel staffer seemed to lend credence to the baseless accusation. Harold Sr. later recounted that he spent several minutes physically shielding his child from this frantic attacker. This incident went on for 5 more minutes, me protecting my son from this lunatic, the father wrote afterward. She scratched me. She tackled and grabbed him. Throughout the altercation, Harold Sr. can be heard in a cell phone video firmly telling Ponsetto to leave his son alone. At one point during the struggle, Ponsetto looked directly into Harold Sr.'s phone camera, which was recording evidence, and screamed a phrase that would soon be echoed in disbelief across social media. "I'm not letting him walk away with my phone." Her voice is shrill with indignation in the recording, capturing the absolute conviction with which she clung to her false accusation. To anyone watching the video later, the scene was deeply disturbing. A grown woman attacking a child, fueled by nothing but her own unfounded suspicions and perhaps the prejudice that a black teen in a hoodie must be a thief. Keon Jr., of course, had simply been holding his own phone all along. Finally, the confrontation subsided. The truth emerged almost immediately. Within minutes, an Uber driver arrived at the hotel with a found iPhone, Ponsetto's phone. She had apparently left it in the car that brought her to the hotel. In an almost tragicomic twist, this proved beyond any doubt that Keon Jr. had nothing to do with her device's disappearance. Her accusation had been utterly wrong. Faced with this reality, most people might apologize profusely, mortified at the mistake. But not Mia Ponsetto. By the time her phone was returned, she had already fled the scene, disappearing from the hotel before the police could be called to sort things out. The Harold family was left shaken and outraged. What should have been a pleasant holiday stay had turned into a nightmare of racial profiling and violence. Keon Harold Sr., reeling from the assault on his son, decided to take the incident public. He had captured part of the altercation on his phone, including Ponsetto's angry demand and attempts to restrain his child. Harold Sr. posted the video online, and it quickly went viral. The footage is jarring. A woman in everyday clothes and a face mask grappling with a teenager, voices raised and echoing in the chic hotel lobby. Within hours, social media lit up with outrage. Viewers around the world were appalled by Ponsetto's behavior, the baseless accusation, the physical attack, and the blatant racial overtones of a non-black woman automatically assuming a black youth must be a thief. In the context of 2020, a year marked by intense conversations about racial injustice in America, this incident struck a raw nerve. Commenters label Ponsetto with the moniker that has come to define a certain type of entitled aggressor, Soho Karen. The media quickly picked up the nickname, referencing the Soho neighborhood where the incident occurred and the now familiar Karen trope of an entitled woman persecuting others under the guise of righteousness. As the video spread, so did the calls for justice. Harold Sr. and the teenager's mother spoke out about what happened, emphasizing that this was far from an isolated event. It was symptomatic of a deeper problem. What about those people that don't get to be heard? Keon Jr.'s mother said at a rally, noting how fortunate their family was to have a platform due to Harold's fame. Prominent voices joined in condemning Ponsetto's actions. Civil rights leaders and activists, including nationally known figures, decried the incident as a prime example of racial profiling in everyday life. The Reverend Al Sharpton stood alongside the Harold family, and renowned civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump took up their cause, AmsterdamNews.com, Refinery29.com. At a press conference not long after, Ben Crump put the incident in stark perspective. Praising Keon Sr. for protecting his son, Crump posed a chilling what-if question to highlight how dangerous Ponsetto's false righteousness could have been. Thank God that this strong black father was there and stood up for his child, Crump said. Imagine if he had resisted. What might have happened if the NYPD showed up and saw a black man defending himself against a white woman? What would have happened? His words underscored a painful truth. Ponsetto's actions might easily have led to someone getting seriously hurt or even killed, given how often such confrontations with implicit racial bias can escalate tragically when law enforcement arrives. The public outrage was not just about this one incident. It was about the larger pattern of entitled individuals, Karens, whose false sense of victimhood can put real lives at risk. Meanwhile, law enforcement had taken notice. The New York Police Department, under heavy public pressure, began investigating and working to identify the woman in the video. It didn't take long. Mia Ponsetto's name became publicly known within days. By the first week of January 2021, the NYPD had gathered enough evidence to pursue charges. Given that Ponsetto had already returned to California, New York, authorities issued a fugitive warrant for her arrest. The stage was set for a cross-country effort to bring her to justice. As police closed in, Mia Ponsetto's behavior took an unexpected turn. Rather than lying low, she agreed to speak publicly about the incident, even as a warrant was being prepared. On January 8, 2021, just under 2 weeks after the hotel confrontation, Ponsetto appeared in an interview on CBS This Morning with host Gayle King. It was a chance for her to tell her side of the story. Perhaps her hope was to dispel the image of the crazy Karen attacking an innocent boy. If so, things did not go as she might have hoped. The interview, aired on national television, quickly became infamous in its own right. Far from showing contrition, Ponsetto's on-camera demeanor was defiant and disconnected from reality. Dressed casually with a black baseball cap that oddly read "Daddy" in large letters, a fashion choice widely criticized as inappropriate for the occasion, she attempted to defend herself. She insisted repeatedly that she couldn't possibly be racist or targeting the boy because of his race, noting, for example, that she is of Puerto Rican descent herself, a claim many observers flatly rejected as irrelevant to her biased actions. Ponsetto painted herself as a well-meaning person who had simply overreacted. "I consider myself to be super sweet," she told Gayle King at one point, as if trying to charm the audience. She offered what sounded like an apology, but it was laden with caveats and passive language. "From the bottom of my heart," she said, she was sorry if she made the son feel as if she assaulted him, or if she hurt the father's feelings. It was the kind of non-apology that only underscored her failure to grasp the gravity of her actions. Gayle King pressed her, calmly but firmly, asking why Ponsetto felt the need to physically attack a 14-year-old. This is where Ponsetto's facade truly slipped. Growing visibly annoyed that King wasn't accepting her version of events unquestioningly, Ponsetto abruptly cut off the questioning. In a now infamous moment, she held up her hand in a gesture of dismissal and snapped, "All right, Gayle, enough." Vogue.com. Her tone was patronizing, as though she were the one being unfairly challenged. The interview segment captured Ponsetto's entitled attitude on full display. Even faced with evidence of her wrongdoing, she bristled at being held accountable. Incredibly, she also questioned the legitimacy of the very idea that she had committed a crime. "How is one girl accusing a guy about a phone a crime?" she asked rhetorically at one point during the conversation. The question left viewers stunned. Ponsetto seemed genuinely unable or unwilling to connect her actions, falsely accusing and then assaulting a minor, with criminal behavior. To her, it was as if the real problem was people making a fuss about her understandable desire to get her phone back. This lack of comprehension, this insistence that she was somehow the aggrieved party, perfectly encapsulated the false sense of righteousness that had driven her from the start. If Ponsetto thought the interview would help her case, she was sorely mistaken. The public reaction was overwhelmingly negative. The clip of her dismissing Gayle King, "All right, Gayle, enough," went viral as yet another example of her audacity. Any sympathy that might have existed for her vanished. In the court of public opinion, she had only further confirmed her role as the villain of this story. And importantly, law enforcement was still on her trail. In fact, within hours of the CBS interview airing, reality caught up with Mia Ponsetto in dramatic fashion. That same day, January 8th, 2021, sheriff's deputies in Ventura County, California, spotted Ponsetto driving near her hometown of Piru. They had been on the lookout for her vehicle to execute the New York warrant. When officers initiated a traffic stop, Ponsetto initially refused to exit her car, apparently not yet ready to surrender. The deputies had to physically pull her out of the vehicle and place her under arrest. The California arrest was tense. Much like the rest of this saga, it too was captured on video by a bystander. Ponsetto reportedly did not go quietly, but in the end, she was handcuffed and taken into custody on the fugitive warrant. After nearly 2 weeks of evading responsibility, she was finally in the hands of law enforcement. NYPD detectives promptly flew out to California, despite the challenges of the pandemic, to take charge of the prisoner. By January 9th, 2021, Mia Ponsetto had been extradited back to New York City to face the consequences of the incident that had by now been seen by millions online. In Manhattan, prosecutors moved swiftly. The case was assigned to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, which chose to treat the matter with the seriousness it deserved. On January 9th, 2021, Mia Ponsetto was arraigned in a New York courtroom, appearing via video conference for the proceeding, clad in casual clothing rather than a jail uniform. The list of charges read out was lengthy and stern. Ponsetto was charged with attempted robbery, grand larceny, endangering the welfare of a child since the victim was 14, and 2 counts of attempted assault. A few months later, a further charge of unlawful imprisonment as a hate crime would be added, reflecting that she had wrongfully restrained the boy in part due to his race. These charges together painted a grave picture of her actions. Essentially, prosecutors allege she had not only attacked the boy, but done so out of a racially motivated false accusation, which is what elevated the incident to a hate crime in their view. At her initial arraignment hearing, Ponsetto pleaded not guilty to all charges. The judge, while releasing her pending trial, imposed supervised release, conditions, and issued orders of protection on behalf of Keon Harold Jr. and his father. This meant Ponsetto was free to go home for the time being, but would be under monitoring and was legally barred from any contact with the Harold family. Outside the courtroom and in the media, Ponsetto's attorney maintained her innocence. He went on the record with harsh words for the prosecution, calling the escalating charges a brazen and clear overreach, absurd, and a perversion of our legal system. It was clear that Ponsetto's defense planned to fight, perhaps by arguing that her behavior, while regrettable, didn't amount to the serious crimes alleged. Over the next several months of 2021, the case proceeded slowly, as many cases did, slowed further by COVID-related court delays. The incident remained in the news off and on, especially whenever Ponsetto had to appear in court. Every development was watched closely, given how much the public had invested in this story as a bellwether of holding Karens accountable. During this period, the Harold family also took action in civil court. They filed a lawsuit against Mia Ponsetto and the Arlo Hotel in March 2021, accusing them of negligence and racial profiling. The suit detailed the outrageous conduct Ponsetto had engaged in, chasing and tackling the teen, searching his pockets, and also criticized the hotel staff for essentially siding with her baseless claim during the incident. The civil lawsuit sought damages for Keon Jr.'s emotional trauma and the violation of his rights. His family shared that the teen, understandably, was left with lasting emotional scars. He experienced fear, anxiety, and confusion after being attacked and falsely accused, and even began therapy to process the ordeal. Meanwhile, the criminal case was building toward a potential trial, and prosecutors had a strong hand, irrefutable video evidence, and a widely condemned act. Behind the scenes, however, discussions of a plea deal were underway. Ponsetto had no prior criminal convictions in New York, and despite the fury her actions caused, this was not a murder or a shooting. It was an assault and harassment case. There was also the question of intent. Did she act out of intentional racism, or was she simply extremely reckless and ignorant? Ponsetto maintained that she hadn't targeted the teen because of his race, though few believed this given the circumstances. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office had to consider what punishment would be appropriate and fair, balancing the need for accountability with the practical realities of the case. In the spring of 2022, a resolution emerged. On April 11, 2022, Mia Ponsetto accepted a plea deal in the Manhattan criminal case. In open court, the now 23-year-old defendant pleaded guilty to unlawful imprisonment in the second degree as a hate crime, which is a felony. This charge essentially formalized that she had improperly restrained the teenager and that her actions were motivated at least in part by his race, the hate crime element. However, as part of the plea agreement, Ponsetto's felony conviction would not be permanently recorded if she fulfilled a set of strict conditions going forward. The deal included a form of deferred judgment. Ponsetto would be allowed to replead to a lesser misdemeanor charge of aggravated harassment after a period of probation, but only if she complied with all terms set by the court. The terms were considerable and clearly designed to address her behavior. Under the agreement, Ponsetto was required to continue psychological counseling and to abide by the terms of probation that had already been imposed on her in California from one of her earlier DUI cases for a full 2 years. She was also ordered to have no further arrests or legal infractions in that period. If she failed on any of these counts, if she got into any more trouble, she could face up to 4 years in state prison for the felony. In other words, the felony hate crime plea would stick, and she'd be sentenced accordingly if she violated probation. But if she successfully stayed out of trouble and met all conditions for 24 months, then, at the end of that period, prosecutors would allow her to withdraw the felony plea and re-enter a guilty plea to a lower charge, a misdemeanor aggravated harassment. That way, she'd avoid a felony record and likely avoid any jail time altogether. This outcome was met with mixed responses publicly. Some critics felt Ponsetto was getting off lightly. No jail time for tackling a child and causing such uproar. However, the district attorney, Alvin Bragg, defended the plea deal as an appropriate form of accountability. In a statement, DA Bragg emphasized that Ponsetto would be closely monitored and forced to address the underlying issues behind her outburst. Miss Ponsetto displayed outrageous behavior, Bragg said bluntly, referencing the hotel incident. As a black man himself, he added that he personally sympathized with the young victim who had endured this traumatic experience. Bragg explained that the plea agreement ensures appropriate accountability by both condemning her actions and working to ensure such behavior would not recur. In essence, the justice system was requiring Ponsetto to prove through her future conduct that she had learned her lesson. If she failed, prison awaited. If she succeeded, she would have earned a second chance. Ponsetto's own attorney, Paul D'Amelia, struck a tone of relief after the plea was entered. He noted that Ponsetto had been leading an exemplary life since the incident. No further scrapes with the law in the year and a half that had passed. And he praised the Manhattan prosecutors for what he called a thoughtful and empathetic approach to resolving the case. The defense attorney maintained that the media and public had put unreasonable pressure on the case without knowing all the details, but nonetheless, he expressed gratitude that his client was being given an opportunity to avoid prison if she stayed on the right path. As part of the plea, Mia Ponsetto formally acknowledged her wrongdoing in court. Though not all the details of her allocution, her statement at the plea hearing, are public, we know that through her lawyer she extended an apology. D'Amelia said it was Ponsetto's wish that Keone Herald accepts her regrets and apology for her behavior that evening, and that everyone involved could move forward with added insight and compassion. Those words, while courteous, likely rang hollow for the Herald family at the time. After all, they had heard Ponsetto equivocate and deflect blame for months. Still, an apology of record was better than none. The Herald family's civil lawsuit was still pending as of that time, seeking its own form of justice and policy changes to prevent future incidents. In the end, Ponsetto complied with the court's requirements. Over the next 2 years, she avoided any further public incidents. She continued therapy, addressing what her attorney described as anxiety issues that allegedly contributed to her behavior. And by 2024, having kept a clean record since the Soho episode, she earned the promised reduction in charges. In June 2024, upon verifying her compliance, the New York court allowed Ponsetto to formally replead guilty to a lesser charge of second-degree aggravated harassment, a misdemeanor, and dropped the hate crime felony from her record. In practical terms, this meant she would not have a felony conviction haunting her future. A significant relief for her, no doubt. She was sentenced to continue probation, if any time remained, and the case was closed without incarceration. The story of Mia Ponsetto, infamously known as the Soho Karen, stands as a vivid example of entitlement run amok and of accountability, albeit delivered in a measured way. It is a chilling tale, not because it involves a homicide or a mastermind criminal, but because it reveals how easily an ordinary person's misplaced sense of righteousness can turn violent and destructive. Ponsetto was no hardened criminal. Before 2020, few would have predicted she'd become a household name for wrongdoing. Yet, in that hotel lobby, convinced of her own correctness, she crossed a line that millions watched with horror. Her belief that she had the authority to detain a young black teenager over a hunch was a stark display of what many see as a broader social issue. As Alvin Bragg put it, her behavior was outrageous, and many agreed it was fueled by racial bias, conscious or not. In the gentle voice of hindsight, one might hope that Mia Ponsetto learned deeply from this experience. The court-mandated counseling and the public scrutiny likely forced her to confront the arrogance and prejudice underlying her actions. In one of her early interviews, she protested, "I don't feel like this one mistake defines me." And indeed, perhaps it doesn't define all of who she is, but it certainly has defined what the world knows of her. The image of Ponsetto lunging at an innocent boy and later telling a respected journalist enough when questioned is not easily erased. It serves as a cautionary image, a reminder that a false sense of righteousness, the kind that Karens are often accused of harboring, can be incredibly dangerous. It can destroy the peace of others, traumatize victims, and in different circumstances, it could even cost lives. For Keon Harold Jr. and his family, the incident left a lasting imprint. They have turned their pain into a call for greater awareness of racial profiling and the perils of implicit bias in our daily interactions. Their nightmare scenario, a stranger's entitlement leading to violence, struck a chord with parents and children of color across America who know all too well the fear of being falsely seen as suspect while simply living their lives. In a broader sense, this case did contribute to a shift. It showed that being labeled a Karen in popular media could lead not just to social infamy, but to legal consequences. Ponsetto was held accountable in the end, forced to answer for her actions in court and comply with strict requirements to avoid prison. The justice system, often criticized for leniency or bias, took her offense seriously, designating it as a hate crime and ensuring she faced public condemnation and punishment, short of incarceration, for what she did. As our story concludes, we consider Mia Ponsetto's journey from an upscale hotel lobby to a jail cell and a courtroom, and finally back home on probation. It is a journey that she and the public will not soon forget. Ponsetto's name is now etched in the annals of true crime infamy, a modern morality tale of entitlement. In her own words during that fateful interview, she said, "I don't feel that is who I am. I do apologize." Time will tell if those words were genuine, but the lessons of her case are clear. In a society governed by laws and mutual respect, no one's personal sense of righteousness puts them above accountability. Ponsetto learned this the hard way. The Soho Karen incident stands as a stark reminder that actions born of entitlement and bias carry real consequences, legal, social, and personal. And in the end, perhaps that knowledge will help prevent similar incidents in the future as we strive to ensure that justice is not just a concept reserved for the powerful, but a reality that protects the innocent. Thus ends our second segment, a cautionary tale from a Manhattan hotel. Rest assured, the individual in question was brought to account for her deeds, and the wheels of justice, though deliberate, did turn. As we reflect on this story, we prepare to journey next into another case of shocking entitled criminal behavior, different in its details, yet bound by the same theme of entitlement meeting consequences. Tonight, let the lessons of the Soho incident settle in our minds. We've seen how even in the calm of a holiday setting, chaos can erupt from one person's misplaced certainty. In our next story, we'll find another startling example. Another Karen who believed herself above the law, only to find herself firmly on its wrong side. Until then, let's take a breath and be thankful that in this case, justice and not false righteousness prevailed in the end. In the dead of night, our next story stays right here in New York City, where it lies quiet and dim. On a narrow Tribeca street under flickering lamps, the city's heart still beats softly. It is here, far above the tunnels, where dreams and steel meet, that our next true crime unfolds. Inside a subway car bound for downtown Brooklyn, a routine commute veers into chaos. A chance brush, a bump between strangers, sets off an unimaginable chain of events. One woman will let the darkness in her mind loose on another, convinced she's in the right. The subway doors slide shut and the train lurches forward. A middle-aged Asian woman settles into a seat, the only sound the distant rumble of the tracks. The peace is shattered when a white attorney nearby, 40-year-old Anna Lushchinskaya, suddenly lashes out. She had been standing, and perhaps she felt bumped. But where most would apologize, Lushchinskaya saw an insult. Off. She snarls at the passenger she says bumped her, the profanity echoing in the empty car. There is no immediate provocation beyond a small contact. Yet in her mind, the collision becomes an affront. She demands the woman get off my train, spitting words more poisonous than the virus of fear outside. Around them, stunned riders freeze. As the train clatters on, Lushchinskaya's fury only grows. Calmly, she removes her sunglasses and glides her hands into a pair of gloves, taking out a long umbrella and a set of keys. Without warning, she raises the umbrella and strikes at the seated woman's face. The tip of the umbrella jabbed between her eyes. A sudden sting. The victim stumbles. Startled, she is knocked to the floor. Fellow passengers gasp. Even in this horror, Lushchinskaya continues, using her umbrella and her keys as weapons, hitting and kicking the defenseless woman. One bystander shouts, "She's not even fighting you back!" But Lushchinskaya only spits on the woman's upturned face and snarls more invectives. It is a startling display of brutality over nothing. A normal ride transformed into a nightmare. Commuters jump into action. Several men tackle Lushchinskaya, wresting the umbrella from her grip. In the chaos, she lashes out blindly, swinging a loaded umbrella at anyone who nears. One heroic young man, Juan Ayala, courageously steps in front of the attacker, telling her quietly, "Don't spit at me." Instead of calming, she flies into another tirade of racism, even leveling a hateful slur at Ayala. "What are you? Her attorney? Fuck King Mohammed," she hisses when he questions her. In the confined car, a chorus of voices rises. Passengers pleading, shouting, demanding she stop. "Your white privilege isn't working here," a voice finally scolds as they escort her out at the next station. By the time the train stops at 36th Street, NYPD transit officers are waiting. The police apprehend Lushchinskaya as she tries to flee the scene, still fuming. The victim is in shock, shaken and bruised, but alive thanks to quick intervention. On the platform, officers read Lushchinskaya her rights. Later, surveillance video and witness accounts become evidence. A clear case of assault charged as a hate crime. In the weeks that follow, the city digests the footage. Lushchinskaya's identity is revealed. A seasoned attorney from Brooklyn with no known history of violence, aside from a troubling incident months earlier where she allegedly pepper sprayed other passengers. Her calm veneer is gone. On camera, she seemed trapped in a delusion of entitlement, attacking strangers as if enforcing some imaginary rule. The legal system moves swiftly. Lushchinskaya is indicted on multiple counts, including felony assault. In November 2019, she surprises everyone by pleading guilty, not to hate crimes, but to a reduced charge of second-degree menacing. The court spares prison, handing her 2 years probation, 15 days of community service, and an anger management class instead. Justice, at least, is served. The nightmare on the subway becomes a cautionary tale. Even in packed cars where chaos reigns, cold fury, and baseless convictions can erupt when someone believes she's above the law. Lushchinskaya walked away with her life and freedom. The victims walked away, shaken. This eerie midnight clash reminds us that Karens in our stories can be anyone. Ordinary people who, in a brief moment, decide to play judge, jury, and executioner. Under the dim lights of that late-night subway, one woman's warped sense of righteousness led her into violence. Eventually, the law caught up, dimming her anger with reality. Our story now moves far from the crowded city subway to a quiet neighborhood in Florida, and across the ocean to a bustling London tube station. In these seemingly ordinary places, resentment and prejudice brewed until they spilled over into violence, all at the hands of women who convinced themselves they were right. The first tale takes us to Ocala, Florida, where a white homeowner's grudge against her black neighbors set the stage for a tragic shooting. It was a warm summer evening in mid-2023 when neighbors in a cozy Ocala community noticed an unsettling tension growing behind the walls of one house. Inside lived Susan Lawrence, a woman in her late 50s, who often seemed anxious and on edge. From outside, onlookers saw her calling 911 repeatedly, insisting young children were trespassing on the yard next door. Susan had claimed a patch of grass beside her apartment as her own private space, even though it was shared with the surrounding neighbors. Over months, what began as complaints about noise and barking dogs quietly escalated. Susan started shouting insults at the children when they played nearby, hurling random slurs at them, and even throwing objects, once striking a 10-year-old boy with a roller skate. She later admitted to prosecutors that she had used racist slurs toward these children. One evening in early June, after months of skirmishes, Susan found herself alone behind her locked front door when everything came to a head. On June 2nd, 2023, just before 9:01 p.m., Susan told investigators that her heart pounded with fear. Earlier that evening, she had already phoned 911, claiming that the children were threatening her. Moments after hanging up, she heard furious banging on her locked door. The person outside was Ajika A.J. Owens, the mother of the very children Susan had been tormenting. AJ, a kind-hearted 35-year-old mother of 4, had come to confront Susan after the roller skate incident injured her son. As the commotion grew, Susan said she ran into a bedroom, grabbed one of her 2 recently purchased handguns, and returned to the door. Moments later, she pulled the trigger through the closed door. On the other side, AJ was struck in the chest at very close range, falling to the ground with her 9-year-old son beside her. Her little boy screamed, "They shot my mama," as neighbors rushed to help. Paramedics arrived quickly, but AJ was soon pronounced dead. In those final, quiet seconds, Susan Lawrence had turned a routine neighborhood dispute into a fatal act of violence. To Susan, the events of that night felt like self-defense. At her trial, she maintained that AJ had been pounding aggressively on the door, yelling threats, and was moments from breaking in. She claimed that with children inside the house and police already on their way, she still felt cornered and unprotected. But investigators pieced together a different picture. There was no sign that AJ had tried to enter. A home camera confirmed the door was locked. Witnesses heard only a single knock. Susan herself admitted afterward that she couldn't see who was outside when she fired. In fact, the sheriff later acknowledged to the public that Susan's stand-your-ground defense didn't justify shooting through a locked door. Further evidence suggested premeditation. Susan had only fetched a gun after already being safe in her locked bedroom and after law enforcement was en route. Prosecutors noted she had even looked up Florida's stand-your-ground law online before telling police about that night, as if preparing a legal shield in advance. What made this case even more disturbing was Susan's history of harassment. Neighbors testified that Susan had become obsessed with her lawn, frequently blasting music or shouting to scare children away. When her complaints to authorities didn't stop the play, she took matters into her own hands, from spraying pests to hurling a thrown umbrella at kids to finally wielding a firearm. Throughout it all, Susan openly admitted to using slurs and treating the Owens family like intruders. In her mind, she believed she was protecting her home. To her neighbors, though, it all smacked of bigotry and unchecked entitlement, a grown woman who thought rules didn't apply to her, culminating in the decision to take a life. News of the shooting shocked the town. Activists and community members gathered for Ayik's family. AJ was remembered as a heart of gold, a devoted mother and friend who spent her life caring for others. Susan was arrested 4 days later, only after public outcry forced the sheriff to act. She was charged with manslaughter, battery, and more. During the months that followed, her case became a flashpoint for a heated debate about Florida's self-defense laws. Stand Your Ground advocates initially argued Susan had done nothing wrong. But as evidence surfaced, more voices spoke up. Many asked, how could it be self-defense to shoot someone dead through a locked door? In a packed courtroom weeks later, the jury heard every detail. The tantrums, the racial slurs, the frantic 911 call before the shot. They saw footage of Susan calmly discussing a closed door she had known was locked. They heard the recorded 911 tapes, Susan's frantic call about trespassing immediately followed by the shot. And in August 2024, after a brief deliberation, the jury found her guilty of felony manslaughter. Susan Laurent, who once felt all-powerful in that neighborhood, now faced up to 30 years behind bars. In the sentencing hearing, the judge sternly noted that Susan could easily have stayed safe. The door was locked. She could have put another locked door between them, the judge said. Instead, Susan came back out, and at the time she fired the gun, she was safe. Every witness agreed. The killing was completely unnecessary. On a late November day in 2024, the courtroom delivered its final verdict, 25 years in prison for Susan Lawrence. AJ's family, while mourning, said they felt justice was served. Her mother, Pamela Diaz, spoke of a lifetime of pain for her grandchildren, left without a mother. Susan apologized for taking a life, but those who lost loved ones knew the apology came too late. Outside court, Ms. Diaz declared that they'd never forget the trauma of that night. Not for them, and not for the community. In the years since, this Ocala tragedy left ripples far beyond Florida. Activists used the case to push for changes to Stand Your Ground laws, pointing out how it had been twisted to excuse a shooting with no real threat. A documentary, The Perfect Neighbor, premiered at Sundance in 2025, sharing never-before-seen footage and testifying about the incident's racial overtones. The victim's family set up a foundation called Standing in the Gap to aid others affected by racially motivated violence. Murals honoring A.J. Owens went up around town as a reminder that complacency can cost lives. And in an eerie echo of that August verdict, people still ask, why did a housewife feel so entitled that killing a neighbor seemed like an option? As night falls on this quiet Florida street, one house stands dark and empty, a life sentence begun. Susan Laurent sits behind bars, her years confined for a crime born of fear, prejudice, and a hollow sense of self-righteousness. The garden where the shooting unfolded grows wild, untended, a silent witness to what happened that day. Hundreds of miles away, another incident was unfolding with similarly unnerving echoes. On the evening of October 11th, 2025, Commuters were flowing through Bond Street Station in central London after a day of shopping and work. The concourse was busy with rush hour noise when one moment changed everything. A well-dressed British couple was striding ahead. The woman, known online as Melissa Rain Lively, an Arizona-based political influencer, and her German partner, Philip Osterman, a financier. Both were supporters of far-right ideas, proudly flaunting a MAGA, Make America Great Again, ethos, even on a London subway platform. Just as a young mother and her sister, with 2 toddlers in a stroller, turned to go down the stairs, the stroller's edge gently bumped Melissa Rain Lively from behind. The baby in the pushchair started crying. The woman looked back to apologize. Instead of a polite response, the scene spiraled into something ugly. According to British police, Mr. Osterman spun around and began hurling racial slurs at the startled mother and her family. He pulled out a small bottle and announced it was pepper spray, then aimed it into their faces. At the same time, Melissa Rain Lively lunged forward and grabbed the frightened woman by the hair. She and her partner shouted vile abuse, making lewd gestures before storming off through the station. Shocked commuters rushed to help. The mother and children were shaken but escaped without severe injury. Security cameras caught fragments of the attack, and by morning, the image of the blonde-haired woman from the video was plastered across news sites. The British Transport Police issued appeals for information. "We want to speak with this couple," they said. CNN even confirmed their identities. The pair was indeed Melissa Rain Lively and Philip Osterman. To many, Rain Lively was already infamous in American circles. Once a QAnon follower, once filmed violently destroying a mass display during the pandemic, and later an outspoken supporter of Trump in both the US and UK. What drove this couple to such a brash attack in a public place? For them, every confrontation seemed framed by ideology. Rain Lively's life had become something of an angry performance. Known for wearing bright blonde hair and heavy makeup she openly claimed as her MAGA look, she often said it was a signal to people with her same beliefs. In interviews, she admitted being part of QAnon in the past, before calling the conspiracy cult well-produced but destructive to her earlier worldview. Osterman, meanwhile, was a wealthy financier with ultra-conservative politics. They likely felt emboldened or even entitled to confront anyone they deemed out of line with their views. In this case, a family on their way home. But standing on a train platform, their bravado turned criminal. Pepper spray is strictly banned in the UK. Using it on a civilian can mean prison time. Attacking a family with racial slurs turned the incident into a hate crime under British law. So far, investigators have not publicly announced any arrests. At the time of this recording, Rain Lively and Osterman remain at large, their whereabouts unknown. Police ask anyone who recognizes them to come forward. The news of the Bond Street incident ignited a media firestorm. British outlets dubbed the woman Rolex Karen for her flashy style and entitled attitude. Conservative and far-right blogs tried to downplay it as a misunderstanding. Mainstream media reported it as a clear assault and hate incident. Social media lit up with outrage. Within hours of the image circulating, "Ye racist tube attack" began trending in the UK. Memes called Rain Lively the MAGA queen of mean, while others connected her London behavior to her past actions, from smashing a store display to verbally abusing strangers. The victim's family spoke out anonymously, describing how the little children, one still in a pram, had been terrifyingly sprayed and screamed at for simply walking. The London mayor's office condemned the attack as hateful and cowardly. Even across the Atlantic, American journalists took note. Here was a Trump-aligned influencer, now a wanted figure in a foreign hate crime story. If Rain Lively once claimed her look kept her on the team, this episode showed how a sense of being on the right side can escalate dangerously. Among the online far right, some enthusiasts leaned into it, praising the couple's aggression as patriotic. But many conservatives distanced themselves, recognizing a line had been crossed. After all, this wasn't a political rally, it was an everyday family. The affair underlined a modern truth. Carrying extremist beliefs into public spaces can quickly turn hate into actual harm. In Britain especially, where the memory of far-right violence still lingers, the attack set off alarms about radicalization and the movement of international extremists into Europe. As the dust settled, Britain awaited the capture of Rolex Karen and her partner. For now, their images remain on police posters. Counselors offered support to the family they attacked. And in a broader sense, the incident forced a spotlight on how entitlement and ideology can fuel even random encounters, reminding everyone that the term Karen has many faces, some far more dangerous than the others who simply demand to speak to the manager. From the suburban streets of Florida to the underground platforms of London, these stories share a haunting theme. Ordinary moments turn violent by a toxic belief in one's own righteousness. In each case, the perpetrator was convinced they were justified, whether protecting their neighborhood or confronting insults to their pride. Their acts left lasting scars. A Jack Owens family will live with their grief. Susan Lawrence will spend decades behind bars, haunted by what she did. The London family will likely be more vigilant forever, while Melissa Rain Lively's future hangs in uncertainty, her charismatic public image shattered by scandal. In the quiet after these storms, communities grapple with hard questions. How does fear masquerade as duty? How does entitlement blur the line between right and wrong? As this series gently unfolds these dark tales, we remember that such tragedies often begin in seemingly mundane frustrations and unchecked biases. And though they happen thousands of miles apart, the women at the center of these stories are tied by the same dangerous hubris. When the camera pans away from these scenes and the haunting music fades, what remains is a sobering truth. Moral certainty, in the hands of the wrong person, can become a lethal weapon. The ripples of these actions, the protests, the prison sentences, the legal debates, and the haunting questions will continue long after the final credit rolls. In the quiet Florida town of Ocala, an unassuming apartment complex sits beside a vacant lot where neighborhood children play. Under the cover of night on June 2nd, 2023, something unthinkable shattered that peace. Inside one of the modest homes, a 58-year-old woman named Susan Lawrence reacted to a knock on her door in a way that would change lives forever. The serenity of an ordinary summer evening gave way to chaos and tragedy as Lawrence grabbed a gun and shot her neighbor, believing she was defending herself. This final story is a slow, burning nightmare, a culmination of simmering tensions, racial hostility, and self-righteous fear that exploded into senseless violence. Susan Lawrence had lived in Ocala for years, largely keeping to herself. She was a widow in her late 50s, working in insurance, who sometimes complained about kids making noise outside. The family living next door included Ajik A.J. Owens, a 35-year-old single mother, and her 4 children. For 2 years, a feud had quietly brewed between Lawrence and the Owens family. The spark was simple. Lawrence believed the vacant lot behind her apartment was her territory. Whenever the Owens children played there, Lawrence became furious. Neighbors later described Lawrence as angry all the time about those kids. Over time, Lawrence's resentment took disturbing forms. She began calling the police repeatedly, claiming the children were trespassing. Police records show Marion County deputies answered roughly half a dozen calls involving Lawrence and the Owens children since early 2021. In these calls, Lawrence often professed fear and claimed the kids were out to get her. At one point, she told a dispatcher that she felt threatened in her own home by the children's presence. Officers responded to reports of loud shouting and even physical altercations. On one occasion, investigators say Lawrence threw a pair of roller skates at the Owens' 10-year-old son, hitting him on the foot. She allegedly swung an umbrella menacingly at another child. In interview records, Lawrence admitted she sometimes called the children vile racial names. A police affidavit later noted she had used the N-word and referred to the children as black slaves. In the eyes of her neighbors, Lawrence had become the embodiment of the Karen stereotype, an angry, middle-aged white woman convinced of her own entitlement, who harassed children and wielded racial slurs. Despite the growing tension, nothing yet shattered the uneasy truce. In the Owens household, life went on. A.J. Owens took pride in raising her kids, doing whatever a mother does at home and in the community. Meanwhile, Lawrence was increasingly isolated, haunted by her belief that the world around her was disrespecting her space. The stage was set, a simmering brew of fear and resentment, just waiting for a spark. Late on June 2nd, 2023, the streets of Ocala were quiet. Inside her apartment, Susan Lawrence sat, uneasy. She was convinced that day's playing had escalated beyond simple neighborhood noise. Earlier, she had told police that on this very day, the children had crossed a line. In her telling, the little boys were skating too close to her apartment. She claimed that when she tried to ask them to move aside, a child suddenly threatened her life. "I'm going to kill you," one of them allegedly said. That fear gripped Lawrence all day. She repeatedly warned herself out loud that something terrible might happen. As dusk fell, Lawrence believed danger was imminent. Around 9 p.m., she placed a call to 911 reporting trespassing. On the line, she said she felt very scared and believed the children were threatening her life. She warned dispatchers that several children were close to her door and that she feared for her safety. The operator assured her that officers were on the way. Just minutes after the 911 call, an unexpected knock sounded at Lawrence's front door. It was Ajik A.J. Owens standing outside, accompanied by her 10-year-old son. A.J. had come looking for help after a minor dispute with Lawrence's children in the lot. The boy was scared and wanted his mother. A.J. banged on Lawrence's locked door and shouted her name. Inside, Lawrence panicked. Believing an aggressor had arrived, Lawrence grabbed a .380 caliber handgun that she legally owned and opened the door just slightly. In the next instant, she pulled the trigger. The bullet tore through the closed door and struck A.J. Owens in the chest. Her son watched in horror as his mother collapsed. Lawrence later told police she thought she was going to kill me, insisting that she had acted purely out of fear. Outside, the boy screamed for help. Neighbors ran to the scene. Deputies, who had been already en route to investigate the earlier 911 call, arrived within moments. They found A.J. Owens lying on the ground, gravely wounded. Her son wept, cradling his mother's bloody body. First responders performed CPR, but it was too late. Ajike Owens was rushed to the hospital and pronounced dead soon after arrival. A.J. Owens, a mother of 4 children, was gone at 35. The night sky turned eerily silent again, but the neighborhood would never be the same. Almost immediately, police began piecing together what happened. Officers reviewed dispatch logs and body cam footage. The timeline was clear. Lawrence had called 911 just 1 minute before she fired the fatal shot. They learned of her earlier calls about trespassing and threats, and found witnesses who had heard screaming. Ajik's 10-year-old son stood by as his mother fell, ensuring there was no misunderstanding about the gunshot. Detectives interviewed Lawrence. Calmly, she repeated that she had been terrified. "I shot through the door," she told them, "because I thought she was going to kill me." The Ford dealership employee, a grandmotherly figure to some, insisted it was an accident, a tragic misunderstanding born of fear. She admitted she pointed the gun at the closed door and fired 1 time, heart pounding, as soon as she saw A.J. Adams' face through the crack. Immediately after the shooting, Lawrence herself had made a second 911 call, saying simply, "I feel threatened. I shot through the door." But investigators saw inconsistencies. The bullet's trajectory suggested the shot was fired from very close range through the center of the door, and forensic evidence showed no sign that A.J. had tried to break in. The door was locked, not forced open. Witnesses contradicted Lawrence's self-defense claim. No one saw A.J. hitting Lawrence or acting aggressively. Instead, neighbors recalled hearing a single gunshot followed by the child's scream, "They shot my mama." Under questioning, Lawrence's story shifted. Detectives uncovered that 6 prior incidents had been reported about Lawrence and the Owens family over the last 2 years. In fact, officers found recordings of her earlier 911 calls. In one, she can be heard frantically claiming the kids were coming for me, while in another she apologized for mistakenly shooting through the door. She had gone on camera interviews from jail, still claiming fear, yet her tone rang inconsistent. On June 6, 2023, 4 days after the shooting, deputies arrested Susan Lawrence. She was booked on multiple charges: manslaughter with a firearm, culpable negligence, battery, and assault. The great fear that had gripped her was now the center of a firestorm. Cable news crews swarmed Ocala. Photographers snapped a mugshot of a pale, calm Lawrence. In one photo that circulated widely, Lawrence stared blankly at the camera, as if still convinced she had done nothing wrong. Her lips even curled slightly as she winked, an eerie sign of her confidence despite the gravity of the situation. What drove Susan Lawrence to this point? Prosecutors and psychologists would later describe a disturbing pattern. To Lawrence, the everyday activities of children playing had become symbolic of an assault on her very life. She truly believed those kids were her enemies. In her mind, A.J. Owens had sent 3 boys to torment her with their play. The children's chatter became screaming taunts in her ears. Every laughter of youth was a personal insult. She had told police that one boy's threat to kill her felt as real as if it were spelled out in bullet holes. Lawrence seemed almost convinced she was the victim of an invasion. When police interviewed neighbors, they painted a vivid portrait. The children played football and hide and seek behind the building, never stepping onto Lawrence's porch. Yet Lawrence insisted loudly that every kid on that grassy field was trampling her property. Even the boys called her names behind her back. One child later admitted, "We nicknamed her a Karen. They said she was always shouting at them to shut up." She reportedly had a "no trespassing" sign planted in the middle of the lot to mark her claimed boundaries. Behind this, some saw racial bias. In court, prosecutors presented evidence that Lawrence harbored racist resentment. She had admitted using the worst racial slur against the children. The Owens children were black, and Lawrence's anger appeared to take on a terrifying racial element. In her eyes, she was not just defending property, but an entire idea of who belonged where. To Lawrence, she was blameless. The real crime was the mere presence of these children on her land. This conviction, twisted though it was, became her moral shield. She truly believed at the moment of shooting that she was doing the right thing, protecting herself from aggressors. Even after the bullet left the chamber, Lawrence never wavered in her belief that fear guided her actions. During interviews recorded by CNN, she insisted it was not a purposeful act, that her finger had just gone off. She apologized on a camera after learning the children had witnessed the shooting. For hurting their feelings, she said. Meanwhile, the victim's son and his siblings were left with memories of blood and loss. Susan Lawrence's trial was held the following year in Marion County. It was a media event, with journalists and cameras gathering details to unravel. The prosecution painted a merciless portrait. A cautious homeowner, locked safely inside her home, had no reasonable reason to believe A.J. Owens, a mother of young children, was about to batter her. They highlighted that Lawrence had already called for help. Deputies were literally minutes away. Still, Lawrence had gone into her bedroom, grabbed her gun, and pulled the trigger. One of the most powerful moments in court came when the judge recounted what happened after the fatal shot. Officer Billy Woods, in a press conference, made it clear, "Stand your ground does not justify shooting through a locked door. This was simply a killing," he said. The defense argued fear, but evidence told a different story. Multiple neighbors testified that the boys had not been doing anything illegal. They were playing hide and seek or riding bikes in the lot. Body cam video showed Lawrence had drawn a line in the sand days before with the "no trespassing" sign. Yet law enforcement noted that pad was never reported stolen from anywhere except her own building. After days of testimony, the all-white jury needed only 2 hours to decide her fate. On August 16, 2024, Susan Lawrence was found guilty of manslaughter with a firearm. The courtroom fell silent as the verdict was read. Lawrence showed little outward reaction. During the brief break, she told a friend she was sure God was on her side, meaning she believed the truth of her fear would save her. It did not. At sentencing on November 25, 2024, the presiding judge did not mince words. She was safe in her home, he said of A.J. Owens, citing the lock time door and the officers already on the way. For some reason, Lawrence went into her room and found a gun. The situation was completely unnecessary. His voice echoed in the courtroom as he handed down 25 years in prison. The judge noted the indiscriminate nature of firing into a crowd and the trauma inflicted on Owens's children who witnessed their mother's death. Lawrence addressed the court with a quiet apology. "I am so sorry I took AJ's life," she said softly. Behind her, Pamela Diaz, Owens's grieving mother, shook her head. To Pamela, Lawrence's regret rang hollow. "I know you're sorry," she responded in court, tears streaming, "but that didn't stop you." Justice for the victims was bitter. Lawrence began serving her sentence at Homestead Correctional in Florida. By late 2025, her former neighbors had launched a wrongful death lawsuit against her, while Susan Lawrence filed a bizarre countersuit for defamation of character against the 8 children who witnessed the shooting. The absurdity of that filing, suing a grieving boy for scars he witnessed, made national headlines, underscoring Lawrence's belief that she was the real victim. The Owens family channeled their grief into activism. The community rallied around the memory of A.J. Owens. A mural was commissioned in downtown Ocala. Family and friends pledged scholarship funds in her name. Civil rights leaders, including Reverend Al Sharpton, spoke at A.J.'s memorial, urging all to remember why her life was taken. Lawsuits and debates grew around Florida's Stand Your Ground laws. Experts noted this case, a white homeowner shooting a black woman, became a flashpoint in the national conversation about race and self-defense. Meanwhile, the story of that deadly knock on the door reached audiences worldwide. In 2025, filmmakers Geeta Gunbeer and Rachel Lyon released The Perfect Neighbor, a documentary pieced together from police body cam footage and interviews. The film premiered at the Sundance Festival, winning awards and bringing the film to Netflix as a chilling cautionary tale. It opened with the same quiet Ocala night and ended by questioning how easily fear became murder. For 30 dark minutes, viewers around the world watched those events unfold again. The children playing, Lawrence shaking as she made her final call, A.J. Owens at the threshold, the shot, and then silence. The documentary did not dwell on gore. Instead, it left viewers with a faint soundtrack of sobbing children and one lesson. In the hands of someone who truly believes they are in the right, even a closed door can become a portal to horror. In the end, what remains is the voice of a mother who lost everything, and the 25-year sentence Lawrence will serve in loneliness and regret. It stands as a grim reminder that sometimes a simple knock on a door, something a child innocently does, can bring forth years of hate. In the quiet that follows this final tale, we are left to wonder how fear and entitlement could twist one ordinary woman into a murderer. The lights dim on this story, but the echo of that gunshot lingers, a stark warning of how quickly neighbors can become nightmares,